In today's macro photography tutorial, I've got a really cool shoot for you guys to do at home. We're shooting different types of fabric, so you can go and gather up some cushions, some towels, some t-shirts, and we're going to explore the texture and interesting details that come with different types of fabric. Stick around and I'll get started in just a sec. Hi guys, I'm Ben from Adaptalux and welcome back to another macro photography tutorial. Today I'm going to be shooting fabric, and this is a really cool and interesting shoot that you guys can easily do at home. All you need is a macro lens that can get really close up. So we're talking a 1:1 macro lens, or better if you can manage it. Today I'm going to be shooting on 2.5 to 5 times macro lens so that I can get as close as possible to the interesting textures and fibers of the various fabrics we're going to look at. Another important aspect of capturing these fabrics is going to be lighting. We're of course going to need a lot of light because we're getting really close, but we also want to be able to take control of our light, move it around, shine it through the fabric if it's thin enough, down from one angle, and perhaps have multiple lights or even colored lights. So I'm going to grab a few different types of fabric and I'm going to set up down here on my coffee table with my camera, tripod and some lighting. So then guys, let me quickly show you what kind of fabrics we've got here today. Obviously the first thing you're going to see is these, really big, thick fabric. So we've got a towel here. This is actually the towel that the cat likes to sit on. This is her little bed. So we're expecting to see, well, a fair amount of cat hair in here as well. We've got a little blanket just here that has a couple of different textures on it. So we've got some quite thick pile stuff here in these little dots, and then a more rugged type of weave. We've also got a kitchen towel just here, which is white, and it's got these interwoven little colored pieces, so that might be really interesting. And then for a little bit of contrast, we've got these little boxes just here. These are both for camera gear. This one's got microphones and things in it, but that is a nice fabric cover over the top of there, and then with some plastic covering on the name as well. And then we have this nice little leather-esque battery holder that we picked up at the photography show this year, and I wanted to bring these in because they are still fabric, but these are much tighter, harder, firmer fabric. On the inside of here we've also got a really nice sort of fabric with some design on it, so that might be really interesting as well. I'm going to be taking a look at all of these using the Lauer f2.8 25mm 2.5 to 5 times macro lens. It's a weird looking little lens, but it's really powerful. It's actually very small in its profile here, but it gets very close up. The 2.5 is wide enough to still be able to make out the fact that we're looking at different fabrics, and that might be better for some of those larger weave, the towel and the blanket. But then it goes all the way up to 5 times magnification, and I think this is where things are going to start to get really interesting in terms of textures and seeing things that we can't usually see with our naked eye. So then guys, here we are with our first shot, taking a look at the towel here, which is I think the biggest weave that we've got, so the easiest to get hold of and be able to see in the back of the camera. We're at 2.5 times zoom, and despite it being quite bright in my room, I've got my video lights on, but I don't have any specific macro lighting. We've got some pretty terrible settings here. We're at 1/50th of a second, we're at f8, and our ISO is 20,000. If the camera will focus on it, there we go, 20,000. So this is really not going to be a very good shot. You can probably even tell just on the footage here that this is going to be really grainy. So that necessitates the use of some additional lighting, for which we're of course going to use the Adaptalux Studio. So if you're new to macro photography or perhaps just new to this channel, then you might not be aware of the Adaptalux Studio lighting system. It's a lighting system that we use to get light into very, very tight spaces like those for macro photography. When your working distance between the front of your lens and your subject is so narrow, it's very easy to cast shadows and block out a lot of the light, and you generally don't have a lot of control over that light if it's just the ambient light in your room. And of course, as you've already seen, even the bright lights of my video lights and the windows is not enough to cast enough light onto a macro subject like this to get good settings. So we're going to use the Adaptalux Studio to add a lot more light into these fabric shots. I'm going to be using either a Control Pod 3 or a Pod Mini. So these are two of the same thing. This one's just a lot smaller, and they plug into lighting arms, which are really flexible, and you can bend the light into the positions that you need them. So if we plug into one of the ports just here, you can see that we now have an LED light which we can control. We can make it brighter and dimmer, and we can place that light right where we need it to be to get some really interesting shots of our fabric. We can bring the light across the surface of the fabric, and hopefully we can also shine it through the fabric to get some really interesting effects with backlighting. I'm going to start out with my towel and try and add a little bit of extra light into this scene to improve our settings. So bringing just a single lighting arm into my shot here, you can see that our scene has changed quite dramatically, and so have our settings. That 20,000 ISO that we had is now reduced to 1,000, so that makes this image a lot more viable. But there's a little bit more to this. It's not just shining light onto the scene, it's about placing the light where it needs to be. So as I move this light around, you can see that the scene changes quite dramatically as the shadows move around. So it's a very, very fine control of your light, and I actually really like where I've just placed that light with the shadows at the front of the image and the light coming from slightly behind all of those fibers. I think it adds a lot more drama to the scene, and we can start to experiment with directional lighting on all of these different fabrics. I'm going to commit to this shot, and I'm going to focus stack it to try and get as much detail as possible. So some of you will be wondering, what is focus stacking? What did he just do there? And well, it is a little bit of an advanced technique, and it's absolutely not necessary for macro photography. However, it is a very nice thing to have to be able to get your images completely in focus. That is a little bit of a lie. The image itself is not completely in focus. We still have a very shallow depth of field, but focus stacking is the act of taking many, many photos along a trajectory of the camera so that the plane of focus moves with the camera, and you can get slices of your scene in focus. You can then process all of those images together, taking just the in focus part of each image and put them all together into a single image. It's not perfect. There is quirks to the software, and especially with subjects like this with lots of crisscrossing fibers, it can get a little bit confused. So I'm not sure whether these focus stacks are going to come out well, or whether it will just be a bit of a mess of computer glitches and strange artifacts all over the image. But it's certainly worth, if you have the capability, to take your focus stack at this point, and you can always revert back to just picking a single image with a nice shallow depth of field and embracing the more abstract nature of macro. So the larger fabrics were really interesting, but I've moved on to this little Kamika box with its fabric covering and that plasticky name across the front, and things have got even more interesting in my opinion, because we've moved up to 5 times magnification. So getting even closer reveals a lot of interesting details that you might not assume from such a smooth looking little box. And this is a very common type of fabric covering that a lot of tech companies are using these days, so it's really interesting to see it up close. I focused in on the join where that plasticky name meets the meets the, well, it's still fairly plasticky fabric as well, but you can't really tell that unless you get up close. Of course, I focus stack these as well, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of results this comes out with. So taking a look at our fabrics has been really interesting so far, but there is one last thing that I wanted to try, and that is a lighting technique that involves shining light through the subject. So I've got this this white dishcloth tea towel that is relatively thin. I can actually see light through this, and I'm going to shine light through this as well. Because it's white, it means that it will hopefully transmit quite a lot of the light through to the camera side. It's also got these blue grayish details on it, which I think will be really interesting to contrast with that white when the light is shining from seemingly within the dishcloth. So the way that I'm going to do this is by moving my Pod Mini and lighting arm underneath the glass surface of my coffee table and laying this down on the top so that the light shines up and through to where the camera is. So then guys, as you can see, I've brought the Pod Mini down here and it's shining up through the glass surface of my coffee table, creating a bright spot of light in the middle of my dishcloth. And wow, was I right about this being an interesting effect. We've got some light shining through from behind the dishcloth, but then the little loops on the dishcloth, I don't know if you can see them on the main camera here, they are creating shadows because the light is not passing through them quite as much. It's creating this really interesting effect, and I think this is worth exploring for a little while. Something as simple as just shining light through the subject instead of on top of it can completely change the game. I'm going to focus stack a couple of these and try a couple of different angles and explore some of that blue pattern in the camera. So you might not be surprised that as a macro focused YouTube channel, I shoot a lot of different macro subjects, and it's very rare that I get surprised by something being really interesting up close. I think most things are really interesting up close. And pretty much everything in my house has been a macro subject at some point or will be in the future, and it's very rare that I get surprised by something, but these fabrics have actually surprised me. I always knew that fabric would be pretty interesting up close, and I've shot some in the past, but never at these magnifications. 2.5 times and 5 times magnification is really powerful, and it unlocks a whole world of being able to explore different fabrics around your house in completely different ways, especially if you have a powerful macro lens like that and a dedicated lighting solution like the Adaptalux Studio. You can really explore and create some very interesting images, whether you have thick woven fabrics like towels or very fine woven things like the fabrics that you find over boxes and photography equipment, bags, that type of thing. Even your clothes could be a really interesting shoot. I've not shot any clothes today, but I think it would be more of the very same interesting stuff that we've been looking at. If you found today's video interesting, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for lots more macro photography tutorials, ideas, and inspiration coming in the future. For now, that is all I've got time for. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.